Welcome to the Forks Over Knives live stream Q&A with Dr. Matt Lederman and Dr. Alona Pulde. I'm your host, Juliana Heber, plant-based dietitian and author of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Plant-Based Nutrition. Based on your enthusiastic response, it seems there's a lot of questions out there on how to live a healthy plant-based lifestyle. To thank you all for being here, we are offering 15% off everything purchased on our online store for the next 48 hours. Use the coupon code LIVE, L-I-V-E, to get your discount. Since you have so many questions, let's introduce the doctors and get started. You'll recognize Dr. Matt Lederman and Dr. Alona Pulde from Forks Over Knives. Since the film, they have become global medical executives of health and wellness for Whole Foods Market, and now are opening wellness clubs in Whole Foods stores where they will educate people on living and eating a plant-based diet. They are also co-authors of the book, Keep It Simple, Keep It Whole, Your Guide to Optimal Health. I introduce you to Drs. Lederman and Pulde. Linda would like to know, how much protein do we actually need?
That's a great question, one that we get often. So the World Health Organization recommends a minimum of 5% of your calories come from protein, and the USDA says about 10% of calories. And what does that really translate into? So for a woman, it's about 46 grams of protein. For a man, about 56 grams of protein. And I myself am not a numbers person, so it's really comforting for me to know that studies, even since the 1940s, have shown that if you can meet your caloric need, meaning you're getting enough calories in a day, and you're eating a whole foods plant-based diet, then you can meet your protein need and don't have to worry about the exact numbers or percentages. So that's really comforting to me.
And the beautiful thing also is that these plant foods are complete. A lot of people think you have to mix rice and beans to get all of your essential amino acids. And the truth is, you could actually find those 8 essential amino acids in almost every single plant food out there. And we challenge people to come up with foods that don't have all 8 essential amino acids. And I know of 2, gelatin and lychee fruit. So if anybody can come up with more, we would love to hear from you. So let us find those other ones. But really, the bottom line is that it's so easy to get all the protein that you need if you meet your caloric needs, meaning you eat till you're full. And you do that with whole plant foods.
Sarah from Canada wants to know if young children should follow the Whole Foods plant-based diet.
I can't think of a better diet to give to your kids. They're not only getting everything that they need, but they're getting the food that stimulates their growth and gives them the best opportunities to be nourished and to grow properly and to be healthy, not only as children, but then as adults.
Right, so we recommend breast milk and then whole plant food, whole plant food-based diets for children as well as adults.
Neil wants to know how we can get vitamin B12 and get it without taking a supplement.
So B12 is made by bacteria that live in dirt. And it's a common myth that animal products produce B12, but really what they're doing is they're eating the dirt and then holding on to that reserve of B12. So if you don't choose to supplement, yeah, you can get it either from meat or you can get it from dirt.
Right, so you get it from those 2 sources, but there's risks associated with both of those. So we feel you always take a risk-benefit ratio, and we feel the risks of eating an animal-based diet just to meet your B12 needs are high, and you can do that with you can meet all your nutritional requirements with a plant-strong diet or plant-based diet, and you can do that. And then take a supplement of B12 just to cover yourself, particularly now when we're using antibiotics and everything's sterilized and antibacterial this and that. So it's just a way to ensure that you're getting that nutrient that is made by bacteria.
Thank you. Norman from Palm Beach Gardens, Florida wants to know if fish and seafood are healthy foods.
Fish and seafood are healthy foods. So a lot of times people ask us for these rules, black and white, good or bad, right or wrong, and they get themselves into trouble. What we talk about are concerns with eating an animal-based diet and the benefits of eating a plant-based diet. And fish and seafood have the same nutritional components as chicken and beef and dairy. And our concern is not if someone has a few ounces of fish a few times a week. Our concern is where are you getting the majority of your calories? Are you doing that with whole plant foods? And if you do that, then you can now make, once you know the risks associated with the cholesterol and the high levels of protein and the acidic nature of animal protein and some of the environmental contaminants that build up with biomagnification, eating higher in the food chain, the lack of fiber, the lack of lots of phytochemicals. When you add up all of those risks, then you can make an informed decision about whether you still want to include animal products, whatever that is, and how much you want to include in your diet. No matter what you decide there, though, make sure you get those whole plant foods in.
Michelle from Indianapolis wants to know if the texturized soy products that seem like beef or chicken are really so bad for our health.
So the concern about soy is really a concern about processing soy and how much do you eat. If you take a soy as a natural form, which is a soybean, it's very healthy. Now, a lot of people eat lots of soy because they think that they need that for protein, or that it's the only complete plant protein out there, which is not the case. Most 99.9% of the whole plant foods are all complete proteins. The problem that you get though is when you start extracting the protein out of the soybean, and then you make something called textured vegetable protein or isolated soy protein concentrates. And now you have one component of the food. You have this natural plant food that you've processed and just pulled out one thing. And we don't recommend eating processed foods, whether it's pulling out the protein or it's pulling out the oil or it's pulling out the sugar. Whatever, we don't want you to do that. Eat its whole form. And then as far as how much soy, the benefits of soy, again, eating it in its whole plant, whole foods form, is when you eat the amounts that they ate, traditionally in Japan. It was a few ounces. A tenth of a block of tofu is what they would consume on average in a day for their entire soy consumption. So they were eating lots of whole plant foods, vegetables, starches, and a little bit of soy, and then the take-home message was just drown ourselves in soy and we'll get those same health benefits, when in fact the soy was just one very small part of a very healthy diet.
And interesting enough, studies are showing exactly that, is that, the benefits that we're purporting to soy are seen in Asian populations, but they're not seen in Western populations. And when that's researched more, it's just like what Matt said. It's because in those Asian populations, they're a small percentage of a much bigger diet that incorporates a lot of fruits and vegetables and grains, whereas in the Western diet, it's in addition to a lot of fats and oils and processed foods, and then even the soy itself comes as a processed form of soy.
We asked people on our Facebook page to write in questions and vote on them. The number one most popular question was, why is olive oil so bad?
And that's another very popular question that we get. And the question is, the answer to that really is, it's not about good or bad foods. It's like what Matt said earlier. It's about learning what are the concerns in regards to a given food, and then whether or not, knowing those and being an informed consumer, whether or not you want to include that in your diet. And when you think about oil, what are really the nutritional benefits of oil, right? It's 100% fat. Olive oil in particular, we're concerned about our essential fats, our omega-3s, our omega-6, and those are a category of oil of fats known as polyunsaturated fats. Olive oil is primarily monounsaturated fat, which is not essential for our diet at all.
Right, and you know how much olive oil you'd have to consume to meet your omega-3 requirements for the day? It'd be 1 cup, which is 1,900 calories of pure fat, just to meet your omega-3s. So olive oil is not going to be a good source of your essential fats. And on top of that, it's much higher in saturated fat than we want. We want to try and get below 7%, yet olive oil is 14% saturated fat. And there's really nothing else in it. It's just you take the olive and extract the fat. So you're really, you don't get much else with it other than fat. So it's really just an unhealthy food that has been brilliantly marketed. And we don't recommend consuming that because you think it's healthy for you.
And part of the popularity, part of the reason that question is so popular is, like what Matt said, is the marketing of olive oil and promoting of the Mediterranean diet. And similar to soy and Asian diets, when you really look at a Mediterranean diet and where the benefits for olive oil came from. It came from a diet, a post-war diet in a small island in Crete. And what they showed was that they had some olive oil, but mostly fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes, a little bit of meat and a little bit of olive oil. And what we took from that was that we should just douse our already fat-laden standard American diet with more olive oil and more fat.
And that's the key, is getting that information so that you can make an informed decision. If you're running around thinking that olive oil is going to protect my heart, that we feel is not an informed decision. But once you learn that the health benefits are the whole plant foods, and if you decide to add a little bit of olive oil to that, that's up to you. But the key is to get that plant-based diet full of whole foods in, and then you can make an informed decision about whether or not you choose to include a little olive oil.
Dorian wants to know why milk is not healthy.
Well, again, these are questions that are, can I have this or can I not? And we don't want to get into that. We want to inform you about these food products, and then you make an informed decision about whether you still want to include that. And a lot of people right now are consuming dairy products because they think they're health promoting, that they need them to get their calcium. And what we want to do is educate people that they don't need to consume those foods to get their calcium. You can get calcium that's extremely well absorbed through plant foods, whole plant foods, and that's where calcium comes from. It's a mineral, it's in the ground, they get absorbed into the roots, and then you eat the plants and you get all that calcium. That's where the cows get it, that's where animals get it. The concern about dairy, if you just look at the nutritional breakdown, whole milk is 50% fat, 30% of which is saturated fat, which is that artery clogging, bad type of fat, not the essential kind. If you have your 2% low-fat milk, it's still 35% fat, about 20% of which is saturated. And if you have your 1% milk, you have your, it's 20% fat and about 13% saturated fat. So as you go down, okay, you get a little bit less saturated fat, but you're still well above where you want to be for protecting your heart, which is less than 7%. And on top of that, as you get lower in fat, you start increasing the protein. And when you do that, Colin Campbell is well known for his studies that connect dairy proteins with this concern for increased risk of cancer promotion. And when you consumed less of that dairy protein, or you didn't consume, or you instead replaced it with a plant-based protein, you didn't have that same risk. So with all of that in mind, we feel like then people can make an informed decision about dairy, but without that information, they're choosing dairy with only part of the picture.
Dairy is also really high in cholesterol, and there are a lot of other concerns about it. It's the #1 cause of allergies. It's a contributor to acne, to some digestive disorders. So really the only milk that we would say is healthy is breast milk for an infant for the first 1 to 2 years of their lives.
Right.
You perfectly segued into Cynthia's question. She wants to know if cancer can be reversed with Forks Over Knives practice as a whole food plant-based diet.
Well, the problem with this is that there's not enough research on this to tell you your cancer is going to be reversed if you do this diet. There's lots of different types of cancer out there, and we like to think of people in all different stages of having cancer, because it takes a while, on average about 10 years before we can diagnose a cancer with our tools and our conventional healthcare practices. And there's cancer that's going to grow and then go away on its own. We'll never know we had it. There's cancer that's going to grow and just stop growing. There's cancer that's going to grow, but it's going to grow so slowly that you're going to die of something else. And then there's that cancer that's going to grow and grow really aggressively, and that's going to potentially kill people. And what we find is that cancer is a very, very complex mechanism, and what we want to try and do is slow down that doubling time, because cancer doubles as it grows, and we want to slow that down and give ourselves the best chance of either slowing it so that we die of something else, or that in some cases it can go away and your immune system can get rid of the cancer. But the way to do that is to stop pouring gasoline on the fire. And this American diet is the gasoline that we have to change. We have to start adding these whole plant foods that are rich in all the phytochemicals and the antioxidants, all the things that we're protecting ourselves. And it's low in things like environmental contaminants that stimulate cancer. It's the best chance that we have of preventing or reversing cancer. And on top of that, even if it doesn't reverse your cancer, it's been clearly shown to prevent and reverse a lot of other chronic diseases that are only going to compound the picture and further tax your body's ability to deal with the cancer. So for many reasons, it makes so much sense to try this plant-based diet and see how that works for you, and not only do the diet, but all of the other activities that we recommend for a healthy lifestyle. Exercise and activity, which is really beneficial for cancer, getting your sunlight exposure with getting the vitamin D levels up, not smoking, removing the alcohol, which is also very significantly associated with cancer. So there's lots of things that are important to do when addressing cancer in addition to the diet.
I think that was a really important point, is that with any chronic disease, or what you want to do is you want to fill your diet with the most health-promoting foods and eliminate all of the harmful foods. And the most health-promoting foods are whole plant-based foods.
Right.
Liz is curious if a plant-based diet encourages type 2 diabetes because of its high carbohydrate content.
Oh. Well, the truth is it reverses diabetes. That's one of its really powerful abilities, is to take this plant-based diet and reverse diabetes, particularly type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, it'll significantly decrease your insulin requirements, but it won't reverse that. Most people, though, have type 2 diabetes, and the truth is that the problem with diabetes, contrary to popular belief, is fat. When you follow these plant-strong diets full of whole complex carbohydrates, so not the carbohydrate that most people consume, which is refined and processed and full of fat, sugar, and salt, but when you use these whole complex carbohydrates that are just wonderfully healthy, you reverse your diabetes, and it happens over and over again very quickly too.
And one of the reasons that carbohydrates are associated in media and common mythology with diabetes is, like what Matt said, is because they come in the processed forms, which are full of fat. And fat really is the issue with diabetes. And Dr. Neil Barnard has a fantastic analogy on explaining how that works. And what he says is that, we have cells, and the cells are like houses with doors. And the role of insulin is to open the door and allow glucose, sugar, into our cells. But when we put fat and oils and grease into our diets, then we really grease those knobs, those doorknobs, and insulin comes to try and open the door and can't do it. So it can't open the door to allow the sugars into the cells, and then they accumulate in our bloodstream and eventually lead to diabetes.
William wants to know if low iron is a concern on the plant-based diet.
Well, remember we're saying whole foods plant-based. So if you're just talking about, plant-based or vegan, you could eat potato chips and Coca-Cola, and then all of a sudden what happens is, iron's a concern. If you eat, iron's another mineral that's found in the ground. There's lots of minerals that we need, and the plants absorb those. And what's really nice is these plant foods have vitamin C in them, which increases our body's ability to absorb iron. And it's this great symphony working together so that our body gets exactly the amount that it needs. And our guts are really exciting there. They can increase or decrease absorption based on need. So what happens is, if a lot of people that have iron problems, iron deficiency, they're actually losing their iron, whether it's microscopic bleeding in the colon and they're losing it that way, or other causes. The bigger issue with most people with iron deficiency is that they're losing it, and you have to figure out where that is. And a lot of the inflammatory issues that people have on American diet actually reverse when they go to a plant-based diet. So not only are they reversing their loss of iron, they're getting a very steady supply with all of that vitamin C that boosts absorption.
Lauren would like to know if it's safe to follow a plant-based/vegan diet while pregnant.
I'm laughing because I am now 29 weeks pregnant. I can't imagine a better diet, just like I said, for kids, for pregnancy. And really, a whole plant-based diet, that's what our body thrives on. We're not only getting the right amount of macronutrients of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, but the right amount of micronutrients, our minerals and our vitamins and our antioxidants and our phytochemicals, and all in the right balance. And not only is that beneficial for the pregnant mother, but there can't be anything better for the growing baby.
Dr. Shadle would like to know if any supplements are necessary on this diet.
So we did mention B12 as a supplement that you may wish to add to if you're doing 100% whole foods plant-based diet, and that's just because we're now in such a hygienic society that we're really cleaning our foods and wiping off the dirt that bacteria that produces the B12 lives in. So short of eating that dirt, that might be a supplement that people would be interested in adding to their diets.
And then the other, people always ask about supplements and how much supplements should I have. And, what I tell people is we treat supplements like medications. And we're not against the use of medications. We just want to use them as the last resort instead of a first resort. So we talk with people and we say, let's try and meet your nutrient requirements with foods, with whole plant foods. And then if we're having trouble doing that for whatever reason, we'll address that, we'll assess it. And if you have a deficiency-related disease, then that we can't reverse with whole plant foods or some other behavior change, then what will happen is we'll talk about supplementing, and then you will make an informed decision about whether or not you want to add that in, because there are potential risks when you add medications and supplements that we'll talk about, and then you decide if the benefit outweighs the risk or not for you. And that's really how we approach it. So, but we really try to focus on first meeting our nutrient requirements with whole plant foods whenever possible. And other than B12, there's not really a supplement that we recommend for everybody across the board.
Nadia wants to know how to get started.
And that's a great question, and for everybody it's going to be a little bit different. And some people hear the benefits of the plant-based diet and are ready to jump in 100%, and that's fantastic. Some people need more of a transition to health where they take it step by step. One of the greatest tools that somebody can use is really learning how to or being comfortable with being in the kitchen and learning how to cook. And then the opportunities of foods that are available to you are really limitless. So it depends on your pace.
And this is a really important question, so I'm going to take a little time on this, because we look at this as learning a new language. And it's very easy to watch somebody speaking a different language and saying, okay, I see how they're doing that, that's great. But then actually being able to do that on your own, that takes time, that takes practice, that takes hard work. And you have to build your vocabulary, and you have to perfect that accent. And you stick with it. You don't expect to be fluent overnight. And you surround yourself with people speaking that same language. And you don't want people that are telling you, oh, you're crazy for trying that new language. And it works really well over time. And you give yourself that time to learn that material. Prove to yourself, number one, is that this will make those powerful differences in your life that we're talking about. And then once you're on board with that, then it's figuring out how to be able to apply this diet and lifestyle to your life for the rest of your life. And that's really important. We want you to do this not for a week, but for the rest of your life as much as you can. And for some people, that's jumping in 100%. For other people, they'll say, don't touch my lunch, don't touch my dinner, just change my breakfast. And I'll say, okay, well, let's have oatmeal and berries for breakfast, oatmeal and fruit and for breakfast. And they say, okay, great. And for a month they're doing that, and they say, I feel great in the morning, and this is easy. This is easy. Come at me harder. And I'll say, okay, well, let's try and do something for lunch now. Let's change your lunch. And then they'll say, sometimes they'll get ahead of themselves. I want to do dinner too. Oh, slow down, And then they're pushing them. Next thing you know, they're pushing themselves to change everything over. So it really depends on where you fall. The way I did it was I jumped in 100% I didn't know anything when I first started. I was about how to do this for myself. I didn't really like to cook that much, and I ate rice and beans for about a week to prove to myself, that whether this would work or not. And I found out I felt great. I just got sick of rice and beans, so I had to learn how to make some other foods. But once I did, it was fantastic, and I think that that's where people have to do that journey for themselves, and then get all the help and support and guidance they need to do this the rest of their lives. But don't approach this as, how am I going to prove to myself this isn't going to work? Prove to yourself how you can make this work for you. And there's two different groups of people. The people that are coming at this to try and show it's not going to work, and the people that are going to say, no matter what obstacle I run into, I'm going to make it work. And those people are successful because they don't take no for an answer.
And remember that it's an individual journey, and for everybody it's going to be a little bit different. Matt jumped in 100%. For me, it was more of a transitional approach, and eventually getting there, but getting there a little bit slower. And if you try and match your pace with somebody else's, then that may be a lot more challenging and not as successful as if you go at your individual pace.
Right.
Dr. Pulde, that's perfect, because Debbie is having a hard time giving up meat and eggs and is looking for suggestions.
And it's just like Matt said. So, if meat and eggs are the two things that you can't give up, then start with oils, start with dairy. Or, just add more fruits, add more vegetables, add more whole grains, add more legumes. And the more of those that you add, naturally the less of other things that you're going to be eating. So there are several approaches to take to that. And then, you may be the one person who decides, hey, I just want to touch my breakfast. So I'm going to do oatmeal for breakfast, and then I'll have my eggs for lunch. Or however it is that you want to transition. But that doesn't mean that you can't eventually transition into the program.
Right, and have fun with it. I know people that say between Monday and Thursday I'm doing Whole Foods plant-based. And then Friday, I'm on for the weekend. And we say, it's great. You're getting your feet wet. You're figuring out how to do this, seeing what works and what doesn't. Experiencing some new dishes. Some people just say, every week I'm going to learn a new plant-based dish. And before you know it, after a few months, they have an arsenal of delicious tasting plant-based foods that wind up replacing their other foods. They actually like them better, and they feel great. We tell people, use the American-based food, the American diet-based foods, as a last resort instead of a first resort. So don't tell yourself, I can never have an egg again. Say, I'm going to try all these other great, delicious foods and meals, and then, if there's one dish or one meal that I need to have this food that I can't figure out how to make in a plant-based, Whole Foods way, fine, I'll do that. But it's a last resort instead of a first resort like it is on the standard American diet right now.
Lori is watching on Facebook, and she wants to know if you have to count calories on this diet.
Whoa, no. Do not count calories. We tell people that's one of the most common complaints we get when people start this program is they try to eat the same portions and the same number of times that they do on the American-based diet. And really that'll get you into trouble. And then what they do is they think it's because they have a meat deficiency. And they wind up adding meat and they feel better. And they say, see, it was a meat problem. And what it winds up being actually is usually it's a calorie deficiency. If they're eating something that was, normally their meals are 2,000 calories per pound, and then all of a sudden they switch to a Whole Foods plant-based diet that's 500 calories per pound, it's a quarter of the caloric density, meaning that you have to eat a lot more. So if you count calories, you're going to get into trouble. But if you follow your hunger signals, you're going to eat until you're full, and that might be a big portion, or that might be frequently, or a combination. And then you're going to do great. And you're going to stop eating when you've gotten the perfect number of calories to meet your body's requirements. But if you count calories or restrict portions, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, and one of the beauties about focusing on a whole foods plant-based diet is that it really helps control your hunger signals, which are governed by the caloric density that Matt was talking about, as well as stretch in your stomach. And because these foods are so full of fiber and water, then you really get, if you're eating until you're no longer hungry, then you're getting the calories that you need. You don't have to count calories. You stay at an ideal weight. I mean, it couldn't get better.
Right.
Conservative Dr. Tom asks, is there such a thing as dangerously low LDL?
Dangerously low. So basically what you're saying is there a disease associated with low LDL? And I don't know of a chronic disease associated with low LDL. Lowering it too much with medications, I think there's a concern of doing that depending on the situation and the risk of the medication itself. And I don't know of an experience of a patient that's ever come in where I had to put them on an LDL drip or I had to give them LDL supplements to fix something. Have you had a patient like that?
No.
So if that's not what's plaguing America right now. If it does exist, I don't want to say it's impossible, but anything's possible. But if anybody has heard of somebody sick because of an LDL deficiency, let us know. We want to hear about it.
Melanie wants to know why the paleo diet is not healthy.
Well, it depends on their interpretation of what that diet is. I mean, that diet recommends eating truly wild game, which is really, really hard to get. That is lower in saturated fat, and if you're gonna have animal products that's in small amounts, that's probably the healthiest way to do it. It recommends eating lots of fruits and vegetables. We think that's very health promoting. It doesn't recommend enough whole grains to meet our, because you have to meet your caloric needs somehow, and it's very hard to do that with just fruits and vegetables for most people. And to meet those caloric requirements without increasing lots of fat or animal products, we recommend adding the whole starches, which include starchy vegetables like potatoes, sweet potatoes, or whole grains. So there's it's much healthier than the American diet, but depending on what you do to meet your caloric requirements, how much animal products you include, how much fat and how much fats you include, there can be healthier tweaks that we would put on that diet compared to what the average person is doing based on what we've seen. Like I said, there's a lot of variation there, and it really depends on what they're doing to make that claim of whether it's health promoting or not. Like I said, lots of diets compared to the American diet you're going to do better. I mean, the American diet is about as bad as you can get. So it doesn't take much to do better, and we don't want you just to do better. We want you to do the best you can.
On a similar note, the Price family would like to know if this diet works with all blood types.
Oh, the blood type diet.
And that's the beauty about this diet, which has been working for hundreds and thousands of years in Asian countries and South American countries and African countries, who are and Mediterranean countries who are living on whole plant-based foods, and they're with varied blood types and male, female, young children, older adults, across the board doing thriving on this kind of diet.
And people ask about the blood type diet a lot, and what we find is that heart disease and cancer and diabetes and obesity, that plagues everybody no matter what their blood type is. And when they eat these whole plant-based foods, it reverses or improves in those people regardless of what their blood type is. So the bottom line is not only does the scientific evidence not support that, but the clinical experience doesn't support the blood type diet. And we would recommend not making any more restrictions or rules in your life than you have to. So by following, and sometimes depending on what your blood type is, it can actually add foods that we have concerns about adding in any significant amount. So there's potential harm to be done by following that diet, and we don't feel that really gets you any benefit.
Elaine would like to know how consuming meat and dairy can increase the risk of osteoporosis.
That's a great question. And meat and dairy, they fall into that same animal product class, and their primary macronutrient is protein, and protein is made up of amino acids. And our body likes to be alkaline or basic, which is the opposite of acidic. So what happens in order to neutralize all of those amino acids that are coming into our body actually leaches calcium from our bones. And that's how it neutralizes those acids, and that's what leads to brittle bones and osteoporosis.
Right. So those, the protein is definitely a major concern, and everybody's worried about how they're going to get enough. I'm worried about how I can avoid getting too much. And that's what I worry about every day. I don't focus on how to get it, because of things like this. The other thing with osteoporosis, it's not just diet. Diet's a huge factor, but there's also activity, particularly resistance training and impact. Impact on the bones is what keeps them healthy and strong. Resistance training, keeping the muscles strengthened and putting that resistance there. Salt. People eat tons of salt in the American diet. You pee out calcium when you eat lots of salt, which can negatively affect the bones. There's so many parts to what affects the bones, and we have a lot. Sunlight exposure or vitamin D deficiency can impact the bones. So what we want to do is we want to look at the big picture and then start making the best decisions we can. And starting with diet's a great place to start.
You also segued wonderfully to this question from Glenda on whether the protein from beans are just as hard on the kidneys as the protein from animal products.
Well, one of the issues with animal protein versus plant protein, there's a couple here. One, the concerns that Dr. Colin Campbell came up with cancer promotion were specifically connected to the dairy protein, but they weren't connected to the plant protein, the same levels of protein intake. The other concern with the bones is that animal proteins are particularly high in methionine, which is a sulfur-containing amino acid, and it's more acidic than a lot of the plant proteins. So one of the most acidic foods is cheese. And that's probably going to hurt some people's feelings, but the truth is that we want to limit as much as we can protein so that we don't get too much, and particularly the animal protein, which is more acidic than the plant proteins. But there's some people with severe osteoporosis that will tell them to limit the bean intake to avoid the excessive, because beans are a more concentrated source of protein for plants. That we'll tell them to actually limit their bean consumption to avoid excessive amounts of protein that some people can get on even a plant-based diet.
And one of the other things that happens with a plant-based diet is because you're eating a lot of other plant-based foods that are so high in alkalinity, which is the opposite of acidic, that they balance out and you end up in an alkaline or basic state. So it kind of neutralizes that bean effect versus being on a high animal product diet where you're going to have a very high acid load that's not being neutralized.
Right. And that's a great point, is to not look at one food, whether it's, people have this idea about superfoods and this is a great food, or one food being really bad. It's look at the overall diet, because that's really what your body cares about.
Elizabeth from the Twin Cities asks, what would you suggest for those who have been following the diet but haven't seen a drop in cholesterol or high blood pressure?
Right. Well, there's lots of reasons. We get those questions a lot when we do speaking events, which is, this diet doesn't work for me, or I'm having this problem and I'm not losing weight. And the good news is, for everybody out there, is that it's not the diet's fault. The truth is that there's usually something that people are doing, either knowingly or unknowingly, that if we tweak that or that group of issues that we find, all of a sudden things get better. And it's more complicated than people realize as far as all the things that go into their diet and lifestyle choices. And what we do is we find out specifically what are you doing, and that means a food diary, every single thing that you're eating, every snack, every nibble. We want to know what's going on, and we follow that for a week, or we want them to tell us what they're eating on average and what they're doing. And then we assess what's going on there with what their concerns are. So I just want to tell everybody that we have yet to meet somebody where if we put them on the Whole Foods plant-based diet that we teach, and we tweak those misunderstandings that they have, that it doesn't work for them or improve what their concerns are. It would be like asking, if somebody who is having trouble breathing and coughing all the time, and asking if they stop smoking, will they feel better? And everybody that stops smoking after a period of time feels better. And it's that same way. When we stop bombarding our bodies with cholesterol and fat and acidic amounts of protein and the lack of fiber, phytochemicals, and other nutrients, the body feels better, and it just works. So it's really exciting, but some people need a little help just going through what they're doing, because they usually have 90% right. We just have to tweak a little bit for them.
On the other end of that spectrum, Maya is concerned about losing too much weight on this diet. What suggestions do you have for her?
And the nice thing is, again, it really depends on what your focus is with the whole foods plant-based diet. And if you're, for most people, if they're eating until they're full and they're satisfied, then they get to a place of ideal weight without losing too much weight. Now, there have been people who focus very heavily on vegetables. And it's very hard to just eat vegetables and meet your caloric needs at the end of the day. You'd have to eat a lot of vegetables pretty much all day long. And that's a very difficult feat for most of us. So the idea is to get a varied a whole foods plant-based diet, whether that's focusing on fruits and vegetables or whole grains or starchy vegetables or legumes. That becomes your choice. But you really want to meet your caloric need, and you want to feel full and satisfied with every meal.
And also identify what you're considering normal. I mean, some people, they have this idea of what their weight should be, and where are you getting that number from? What we like to do is tell people to live this lifestyle, eat these foods, and see what happens. Let your body tell you what's healthy. And then if you feel that you still want to manipulate that number, either increasing or decreasing weight, we can adjust that, and we can actually do that in a healthier way. I mean, if somebody really wants to gain more weight, they eat more frequently, they eat bigger meals, or they can change the composition of their food and eat a little bit more processed. So instead of eating, and processed, is a continuum. It's a continuum from healthy to less healthy. For example, you can take a wheat berry and dry it and grind it up and make it into a whole wheat bread. The whole wheat bread, without the oil and salt and sugar and fat, can still be very health promoting. It's just a little bit more calorie dense. And if you eat that, you could start. You'll put on some more calories. You'll put on some more pounds over a period of time. You could also have more concentrated sources of fat. In other words, all whole plant foods have fat, and they are particularly high in the essential fats. But if you want a concentrated fat source, you can have nuts and avocados and seeds. And that also will help you put on more weight. But in the end, we would ask you, why are you wanting to put on more weight, and is that going to help you achieve optimum health or not?
And just one last thing, which Matt mentioned earlier, and I think really fits here as well, is we've been so, I would say, brainwashed to portion control on the standard American diet to maintain our weight, that what happens when you go to a whole foods plant-based diet is you try to maintain those same small portions, and that won't work. You really need to eat. You're going to be eating, because the calorie density of the food is so much less on a whole foods plant-based diet compared to the standard American diet. You're going to be eating a lot more food. So if you try to limit portions, you may run into problems with hunger and losing excess weight.
Gerald from Ohio wants to know if a plant-based diet will raise triglycerides.
So that's a common myth about a plant-based diet, particularly carbohydrates. And if you eat, and the studies show that if you eat refined carbohydrate, particularly the flour, and processed, so you remove you're eating white instead of brown, and you're removing all the fiber, you can get into trouble there. So, or you're drinking lots of juice, which is your liquid calories. Again, you're processing the food. So the people that run into triglyceride problems are those that are sensitive to that processing. So there are, some people aren't sensitive to that, and they won't have a problem with their triglycerides anyway. But those that are, we tell them to be careful about having even the whole grain flour products, and really focus on having the whole unprocessed foods like the brown rice as your carbohydrate, or quinoa, or corn, or potatoes. So don't have the whole wheat bread or the corn tortillas. Most people don't have that problem, but those that do, that helps them. And what we find in the studies that connect carbohydrate to high triglycerides is they're using refined carbohydrate, and they're also forcing people to eat even more calories. So not only are they eating refined the carbs, but they're stuffing themselves more than what they would if they just were allowed to eat until they're full.
Right, and I think one of the things that is kind of a re-education is the familiarity with carbohydrates that we have on a standard American diet and what carbohydrates actually are on a whole foods plant-based diet. And like Matt said, on a standard American diet, they come as refined and processed foods, and on the whole foods plant-based diet, they're fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, starchy vegetables. So they look very, very different. And you know, the processed refined foods that can lead to trouble with triglycerides have a lot of other, you know, fats and oils and all the things that Matt mentioned that contribute to the problem. But it's not the potato, for example, that's causing the problem. It's the French fries that they're fried is the problem, right?
Right. So I remember on average Americans eat less than a serving of whole grains a day. So we're eating lots of carbs. In fact, you know, 60 to 70% of what the ingredients used in the American diet are the same ingredients that you use to make donuts. And that's oil, sugar, and refined carbohydrates. So, you know, there's a problem, and a lot of the concern about carbs is not the carbs that we're talking about. The problem is what the carbs on the American diet and the carbs, what they're coming along with, which is the oil and sugar and fat.
Mike would like suggestions for how he can best influence his wife and 13-year-old daughter to follow the plant-based diet with him.
So,
I think some things that have worked really, really well for others is leading by example. So if you are adopting a whole foods plant-based diet and you are excited about it, getting your especially your kids involved in making dishes together, in sampling dishes, in finding out what are their favorite foods, what do they like to eat, and how can you make plant-based versions of those favorite foods. And the more they see how great you feel, how great you're doing, it really influences people and excites people to come along on the journey.
And explain to them why you're doing it. You're not there trying to make their life difficult. You actually have concerns for their health, and you want them to thrive well into their old age and not have to deal with chronic disease and be around so you can be a family together for a long time to come. And if they're not aware of that, that's where you say, hey, can you sit down and watch Forks Over Knives with me? I really want to show this to you because I think it can really make a difference in all of our lives. And then once they do that, they'll have that information, and then you can work together and say, you know what, we don't have to get crazy. Let's all pick. Look at this lasagna here. Let's try and make that plant-based lasagna, and let's see how it tastes. And then we're going to try this. Oh, look at this. This is enchiladas here. We can make that. Let's do that together. And then you get all excited. Oh, let's make this dessert, and we'll make this soup. And then before you know it, you have all these great tasting dishes, and you're doing it together instead of you trying to force them to do it. So work together, and I think people will all come along over time.
Which leads me to a perfect question from Pam. She's looking for suggestions on navigating social situations such as potlucks.
Well, we recommend don't going out of your house.
Your social life ends with a plant-based diet.
No, I'm just kidding. So the social scene is actually a really important thing because you're going to be doing things that are different. Your friends might not understand why. So after you've told them all about this great movie that helped you change your life and what you're going to do and why you're doing it, then the other thing that we find is really helpful is to bring foods to potlucks. And every single person, not every, but most people we talk to say that the food that they bring is the first one to go. So it's like, oh, this is my sweet potato stew, and this is my dessert that I'm bringing. And you know what? Everybody tries it and like, wow, this is pretty good. And then they eat it. And sometimes you don't even tell them, oh, that's Matt's dish. Don't even tell them, because then they'll think I did something crazy to it. Instead what we'll do is we'll just say, this is the lasagna. This is another lasagna that's here, part of the potluck. They try it and they're like, wow, this is great. And then if you want to later, you can tell them it's actually health promoting too. But you don't have to. I think that's the key, is to get them, when you go to potlucks, to bring stuff with you so they can experience how great this tastes and realize you're not just living off of salads, for the rest of your life.
And that's it's important for you as well as for others, because you're bringing dishes that you know that you can have and that you don't feel deprived in a social setting where food is such a big part of that engagement. So you want to bring things that are really your favorites.
Right.
Adam from Livestream asks, what do you recommend for snacks on the go?
It's really what works for you. Some people have, these little whole wheat thin crackers that they have. Some people bring some, little corn chips, baked corn chips with hummus. Other people bring a little bit left over from breakfast. We'll take these oatmeal and mix it with some fruit and freeze it into bars that we can bring with us. Sometimes I'll just bring a little bowl of whatever I had for dinner, and I bring that with me, and it's a little Tupperware that we eat out of there. So, you bring the
yeah.
that you
I have my Power lentil burgers that that really stack nicely into Ziploc bags, and I take with me wherever I go. And those are really power punches for me when I'm on the go.
Yeah, so if you see her, she'll be pulling out a lentil burger wherever you're going. That's what she's doing. She's got her little power bar. So figure out what works for you. But there's all these options, that people can use, and it's not a matter of trying to find something. It's trying to find something that works for you, because there's lots out there.
Any other beverages besides water, like teas, that you think are well to be consumed? This is from Liz on live stream.
Well, I think that water is the beverage of choice. So if someone said, I don't care about what I'm drinking, what do I drink? I would say just drink water. You don't need to add anything else. So anything else that you add is whatever you need to do to eat this whole foods, plant-based diet for the rest of your life. Some people who are used to drinking tons and tons of soda, when they first start, what they'll do is they'll have a little seltzer bottle of club soda, and they add a couple ounces of apple juice, and that makes a soda replacement for them. Some people, like I said, go cold turkey, and they just drink water. Other people, like, tea is health promoting. We have some concerns for some people in particular with caffeinated beverages, but tea is a very health promoting food out there, or drink. Any other drinks? I mean, really, it's a matter of, some people bring up alcohol, and should I have alcohol or not? And there's nothing health promoting about alcohol. So don't drink it because you think it's going to make you healthier. But now some people will say, if I have a glass of wine a few times a week, it's really going to be important for me to continue this diet and lifestyle. I'd say, great, then, have your wine, and then down the road we can talk about if you still need it or not. But you see what I'm saying? So that's what we want you to do. Is water is what's health promoting. Some teas can be very health promoting, and anything in addition to that, you add based on what you need to do to make this diet and lifestyle successful for you for the rest of your life.
Right, and I think that really sums it up. It becomes, what do we need, and then what do we want to make the rest of our diet doable? And what we need is water, and what we want, then we can base it on just like we were talking about before, that individual path that you take.
Right.
Speaking of beverages, Stuart on Facebook wants to know how you feel about using hemp protein in smoothies.
Hemp protein, again, is not a whole food. So if you want to add hemp seed, that's one thing. But to extract the protein and put it into a powder is doing a couple things. One, it has that concern that we have because certain isolated proteins actually increase your IGF levels, which is connected to cancer and aging and acne. So we don't want to have these concentrated, isolated proteins. The other thing is that why are we adding protein powders? Is that mindset that we need to add protein to make this diet complete? And that's a myth. So you don't need to add protein for that reason either. So what we would do is, if you feel that you want to add hemp to your smoothie, then you do that in its whole foods form.
In the spirit of the upcoming holidays, Heidi from Nebraska would like to know what you suggest to make for a good meal on Thanksgiving.
Well, you just worked on a lecture on this.
You can make really healthy mashed potatoes. You can make plant-based stuffing. You can make a cranberry dessert or a healthy pecan pie. There are a lot of options that you have for, like I said, it's really limited by your imagination, because you can pretty much make a healthy plant-based version of almost any one of your favorite foods.
And those few that you can't, for whatever reason, that's not going to make or break you on this program. The key is replacing most of your calories with these whole food plant-based foods. And if people had a turkey on Thanksgiving and that was when they had their turkey, that's that's actually not a problem. The problem is when they have turkey 3 times a day, 365 days a year. That's all of a sudden now they're having a holiday 3 times a day, all year long. That's where you get into trouble. It's not having the holiday on occasion and feasting then if that's what you choose to do. But like we said, there's all these other plant-based options that you can have as well.
Right. You can still have your healthy mashed potatoes and your healthy gravy and your healthy candied yams and your healthy stuffing and healthier pecan pie. So you don't have to be deprived for the holidays and still be able to be plant-based.
Right, exactly.
You're making me hungry. Greg on live stream wants to know if you recommend green juice cleanses.
So, now we're starting to get into some of the superfood ideas and a lot of these medicinal supplemental products. And the truth is that your body naturally is cleansing itself constantly. And the bigger problem is that we're throwing 3 times a day or more, we're throwing all this toxic exposure, all these toxins on top of, in the forms of the standard American diet. And once we stop doing that, all of a sudden we heal. And it's similar to if I hit your hand with a hammer 3 times a day and your hand was hurting, if you stopped hitting yourself in the hand with a hammer, your hand would heal on its own. You don't need to do some type of cleanse or healing maneuver for the redness and soreness to go away. And that's what happens with your body. When you stop bombarding it with the toxic American diet 3 times a day, it will heal. And that's what's exciting. So we find that people don't need to do all of these additional cleanses out there. They need to make these diet and lifestyle changes. And then for those few people that we have to do dealing with specific medical problems that are pretty downstream and have been going on for a long time, sometimes we have to do some additional treatments by tweaking the diet or doing some other things that are specific to their medical issue. But for most people, that's not necessary.
Becky would like to know if grass-fed beef is more nutritious than grain-fed beef.
And again, when you ask that question, you have the nutritional value, and then you also have the concerns, because you can't isolate the nutrition that you're getting from the bigger concerns. It comes as a product. And so you're remembering the cholesterol and the fat and the excess protein and all of that stuff, in addition to what little nutrition, if any difference, there really is in the two.
Right. And that's the key, is that, okay, so maybe it's a little bit lower in saturated fat from its grain-fed version, but it's still too high compared to what will help you achieve optimum health. It might have a little bit more omega-3s if it's grass-fed versus grain-fed, but you still, can't get enough of your omega-3s by consuming that product. In other words, just because it's a little bit better doesn't mean it's ideal for helping you achieve optimum health. So if you're going to choose to include that, yes, maybe you're trying to pick the one that has the most ideal nutrient numbers for that product. But if that overall product is not going to help you achieve optimum health, then that's the bigger picture that you need to take home with you.
For the final question of the evening, lots of people asked where they could find a doctor who practices like you practice in the movie.
Right now there are not a lot of doctors that practice this way, and that's something that we're hoping to change. And we're getting more interest from doctors that want to practice this way. And what's exciting is that you can start asking your doctor to help you, and you can educate your doctor and raise their awareness to this. You can also search around to doctors that might be practicing this on the side, so maybe they don't know that you're interested in this, and if you talk to them about it, they would be able to help you. And then if you look at forksOverKnives.com, there are some doctors, particularly a lot of them are actually in the film, that are practicing this way, but it's unfortunately right now it's not easy to find doctors like this. So I just wanted to thank everybody for listening. This has been a great opportunity working with Forks Over Knives. These are great questions, and keep them coming. Don't give up. Everybody can do this if they put their mind to it. And just take it one day at a time. Your lives are going to change when you do this for the better.
And the holidays are coming, so gift your family wellness and have them see Forks Over Knives.
Well, our time is up for tonight. I want to thank Dr. Alona Pulde and Dr. Matt Lederman for being here and answering these questions in such an amazing way. And I wanted to remind you all that we are offering 15% off all items purchased on the Forks Over Knives website for the next 48 hours. So just use the coupon code LIVE, L-I-V-E. And thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.
Good night.